experts who are primed and ready for the Chancellor to get to his feet at 12:30. What is it going to mean for you and me, and how much money are we going to have? Jasmine Birtles and Roddy Cohn are here with me. Jasmine, the thing about this budget is there have been so many leaks, haven't there? Are we going to get any surprises?
Well, I was wondering that myself. You know, I'm hoping to get at least one or two nice surprises, but it seems that all the newspapers, all the media have pretty much all the news. So, you know, you almost wonder why he's going to bother saying it in the House this afternoon.
OK, Roddy, what are you expecting to hear from the Chancellor?
Well, that would be a refreshing surprise if he didn't actually stand up and say anything, wouldn't it? I mean, that would be the surprise of the year, I would have thought. I would like to see that he pays enough attention to small businesses in particular. I think there are a lot of hard-pressed small businesses who want to see some real changes, both in legislation, regulation and in capital allowances, making sure that they can actually invest in their businesses and keep going through these very difficult times.
Yeah, I wanted to put that question to you because we've had a tweet from Karen Singh who's said, what will the government do to help small and medium-sized businesses and give them a level playing field with bigger corporations?
Well, I mean, there are definitely things, Karen, that can actually be done, and they can be really beneficial as long as the government doesn't start faffing like they did under the Labour government with introducing changes that take 3 or 4 years to come in. So what we actually really need to see is things like capital allowances. When you invest in your business in technology or equipment or people, being able to be written down in the year that you actually spend the money, because that makes a difference to your profits and to your cash flow, and that's what will be meaningful.
OK, Jasmine, one for you here. Cameron Kinlock, who wants to know what help are we going to see for low-income couples who earn too much for benefits but are still struggling to make ends meet. And he says governments always forget about us.
Yes, it's true. And certainly in the last year or so, it has been the middle-income families that have been really squeezed, I think. And certainly if you're middle, like you're just on the border of possibly going into higher rate tax, you're definitely going to be squeezed come April.
And child benefit, of course, is a key issue there,
Absolutely.
isn't it? If you've got one higher rate taxpayer in the family.
Yes, and so a lot of these credits and tax credit is coming down as well. I think the good thing that has been leaked, of course, is that the basic rate of tax is going to go up. Personally, I'd like to see it go up to 10,000. I'd like a real whack up so that it takes out a lot of all the fuss with bitty benefits and tax credits and all this sort of stuff. But at least if that can be raised, and apparently it's going to be, well, that should help people on low income, certainly.
And one more question. Martin Beecroft has said, if the economy is in such a bad state as we're forever being told, how come we can afford another war? I don't know if any of us can answer that question. We will be having lots more reaction here in the newsroom throughout the day here on Sky News. And do tweet us at Sky Hughes is my Twitter address. Here is the scene over Westminster. The Chancellor will be giving his budget speech at 12:30 after Prime Minister's questions. We'll have it all. Yeah, Dermot, one of the biggest costs for families lately in particular has been the cost of filling up your car at the petrol pump. Well, the Chancellor has today announced a 1p cut in fuel duty. What's that going to mean? Well, let's talk to Roddy Cohn and Jasmine Birtles, who've been leafing through the Red Book. So 1p cut in fuel duty, and the fuel escalator's been scrapped. Now, that was introduced by the last government. What's going to pay for this? Yeah,
well, this is Peter and Pan syndrome, isn't it? You might scrap one thing, but this government's introducing the fare fuel stabiliser, and that's a rather complex method, effectively, of saying that when prices are high, the government's going to make an attempt to only increase the cost of your fuel duty by RPI. But when prices are low, and they're suggesting around $75 for a barrel, that'd be around the trigger point, then the government will look to actually add a penny plus RPI to the cost of a litre of fuel. So it's a bit of a complex mechanism, and there's certainly no trigger point being agreed, but that's what they're hoping to achieve by changing the system.
So this cost, Jasmine, of this 1p cut in fuel duty, it's estimated it's going to cost the Treasury about £600 million. But they're getting, aren't they, £2 billion from an extra tax on North Sea oil companies?
Yes, absolutely, which looks like a really good idea to start off with. And then you start thinking, they're going to find ways of putting that cost back onto us. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if they and their accountants are already working on how they can get out of much of this tax and just put it on the price of petrol for us.
Now, this 1p cut comes in at 6 o'clock tonight. Are we going to be seeing petrol stations all around the country taking their prices down by that 1 pence at 6 p.m?
Well,
Do they have to?
I have to tell you, if I owned a chain of petrol stations, I'd pass on that cost to you straight away. But the reality is, whether the supermarkets will do that, whether the fuel stations will do that, and bear in mind that most of us these days end up paying a very, disproportionately large difference in prices of fuel. So you can go to the service stations and pay maybe £1.45 a litre and pay maybe £1.30 in the high street. So that differential alone is enormous, and therefore the 1p reduction doesn't look as though it's going to make a massive difference.
And of course, we've got a 1p reduction, Jasmine, but actually we had a 2.5% increase with VAT in January, which really put our prices up, didn't it? And he hasn't scrapped that.
No, absolutely. In fact, there are a lot of things in this budget that haven't been mentioned. I mean, just to mention something quite different, I was expecting to see more help for the elderly and vulnerable with heating bills, you know, a different type of fuel. Nothing has been mentioned there, which is very surprising because, you know, heating costs have absolutely rocketed just in the last few months.
Yeah.
So I'm really surprised that there hasn't been more help there. Help for charities, yes,
Well,
you know, but not the elderly.
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? You know, everybody knew at the outset that this was never going to be a practical budget where the Chancellor could give anything away. I don't think he's given anything
And
away.
he said that himself at the beginning,
he's tried
didn't
to
he?
make it look as though he has. Well, he's still, you know, puffed up his chest a bit and, you know, shouted across the room that, you know, the government is doing something for the economy and so on. But in reality, we are in such a fiscal we've got such debts hanging over us as an economy that actually there wasn't anything to do with that. I think what's worse is that gas prices and the excess amount of that gas that's being stored is actually there, so prices should naturally fall. And we're back to the fact that the traders aren't actually controlling these costs better, they're just making money out of it.
And what about business mileage? Because those of us who do drive around for work, we've had this 40 pence per mile rate for such a long time, and it's borne no resemblance to the price of fuel. What's he done about that?
Well, yes, he's put that up to 45p per mile, which is great if you are an employee, you use your own car, or if you are self-employed. But it's rather too little too late in a sense. Having said that, from a green perspective, you might say, well, really, he should have ignored that. He should be increasingly stopping us using our cars, you know, not just expensive petrol, but actually giving us more incentives to use our bicycles. I think, again, from a green perspective, this hasn't been a particularly interesting budget.
And as a cyclist, you would probably be quite happy about the pothole measures.
I would definitely be happy about that.
£100 million to repair potholes, but £100 million, given the amount of potholes we've got after this winter,
not a
is
lot.
that going to go far enough?
I don't think so, no.
And I think, like everything else, you know, for most of us, that seems all nebulous nonsense, doesn't it? These are things that government should be doing, from the taxation that they've already had, from the rates bills, from the other taxes, central government taxes. So what on earth is happening to the way that governments spend our money should be far more where we're concerned, and in particular, you know, that the accountability for how local government is spending money, it becomes more transparent, because all that seems to happen is year after year after year our taxes directly and indirectly go up. But never mind just community benefits and so on, but services in general get weaker and weaker. Yes, so it's not a happy state of affairs.
We're going to have to leave it there. Roddy and Jasmine, thanks very much. Let's find out what motorists think about this cut in fuel duty. We can talk to Gamal. Tax will go up by £630 to £8,105. He says that's a total of £320 extra for the hard-working people. Let's talk to our experts and find out about that. £320 sounds good, doesn't it? But that's offset by the VAT rise that we've already had, isn't it?
Exactly. And of course, but as far as most people are concerned, it's certainly going to help. It can't not help. But I think the problem is that depending what other taxes come out of this budget, when you get into the detail of what they call the Red Book, you may actually find that that £320 is being diluted in all sorts of other indirect taxes. So don't just take it as being a freebie, because there's no such thing as a free lunch.
And Jasmine, you were talking about this earlier, a good move, but you would like to see it go higher.
Yes, I would. I'm all for simplification of taxation and pensions and quite a few other financial and economic elements. I would like to see the basic rate of tax coming in at 10,000. 8,000 and, you know, whatever, that's okay, that's a good start. 10,000 would be better.
And on pensions, the subject of pensions, he mooted the idea of £140 a week flat rate state pension.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
Well, that's good. You know, at the moment, the basic for many people is £95, which is really not nearly enough, particularly when we see the heating bills and food bills that have gone up.
But this is going to get rid of means testing, isn't it?
Yes,
so those worse off won't benefit as much.
You say that, but it may not, because actually what they've really said is it's subject to further consultation and research and affordability. In other words, what's at the heart of this change is that on the surface of it, you may be going from 95 to 140, but you definitely will not be if it costs the government a penny more than it's currently paying. So this is going to be Marvo the magician at work here. Somebody's pulling out a rabbit from some hat that I've yet to see. And it's
interestingly, something else under consultation is a device at which the age of retirement is being set. It's going to be 66 by 2020, but he was talking about it rising in line with longevity, with life expectancy.
Oh yes, well this is something that has started already, as you know. In the age at which women particularly are retiring is already going up. That's going to have parity up to, you know, women are going to retire at 65 like men in a few years' time. But yes, they're already talking about us all retiring at 68, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's 70
And
very
at the
soon.
other end of the age spectrum, just very briefly, Roddy, want to talk about first-time buyers' moves to help them?
Yeah, well, I'm not overly impressed by this initiative. It's directed largely at 10,000 people, where what in effect will happen is the government will put 10% of the deposit in, you'll put in 5%, and the developer will put 10% in. But what I've seen...
And this is a loan, it's not just a giveaway.
Exactly, but what I've often seen in these circumstances, it's a bit like when double glazing was encouraged, or when solar panels have been encouraged by government. As soon as government starts to get involved with these incentives, all that happens is the developers will put the price of the property up anyway to reflect these incentives. So actually, the hard-pressed person who's meant to benefit from this will actually be harnessed with debt for longer, and a bigger amount of debt at that. Not really a clever move by any stretch of the imagination.
Roddy and Jasmine, lots more to talk about. We'll be back with you later on in the programme. Let's go live to the city now and speak to our business presenter, Joel Hills, who's there. Joel?
Yeah, hello there, Sarah. Now, you may have heard the Chancellor
of National Insurance and Income Tax was mentioned by the Chancellor in his budget today. Quite a significant reform of taxation if it does come in. Let's talk to our panel of experts, Roddy Cohn and Jasmine Birtles, about this. Jasmine, this would make it more transparent is the idea, isn't it? So we know exactly what we're being taxed.
Yes, it's an interesting idea to merge national insurance and income tax, because national insurance is a tax by another name, and it's one of those annoying stealth taxes, particularly for employers who have employers' national insurance on top of the basic salary. So if they do merge it, then that will mean that we will see very clearly what we are losing in tax, but there will be implications for pensions, because of course pensions, our state pension, is based on national insurance contributions. So I don't know how they're going to work that out.
Yeah, and pensioners actually, we've had some emails and tweets about this, worried that they were going to have to start paying national insurance, because of course they pay income tax on the interest on their savings at the moment. But the Chancellor did say that this wasn't going to affect pensioners, didn't it? I suppose it does stop them stealth tax rises, because they can't say we're not going to raise income tax and then raise national insurance.
Yes, which is what the last government did. And yes, that's exactly the point, that we are trying to get. I say we, you know, the nation would like to get more transparency. We'd like to have more honesty. If we're going to be taxed, we need to know about it. So I hope that this consultation will come up with something that is better, fairer and more transparent.
And of course, national insurance going up to 12% next month. Now, Roddy, what about savings? Did we hear very much about our savings in this budget?
No, and in some ways that's not a surprise. I mean, we were told at the outset that the Chancellor has relatively little money to give away because of the state of the economy and, if you like, the Treasury's finances. However, what's disconcerting to see, that as we also said at the outset, when you look at the detail of this budget, you start to find anomalies, things that aren't very nice indeed. So, for example, when you save money in ISAs, each year generally the government gives an indexation allowance so that you can save a bit more the following year. And that used to be linked to things like the retail price index. It's now going to be linked to the consumer price index, and that's roughly a reduction 10% less. Therefore, it's a very significant figure. And yet, at the same time, fuel duty, tobacco, alcohol duty increases are all being linked to the higher figure of RPI. And this is really, you know, come on, George, you really need to get your act together here. You know, you can't talk the talk and not walk the walk.
And say we're going to simplify things.
Well, because if we want people to save, if we want to stimulate business and so on, the idea is you cannot say take personal responsibility for your old age and your savings and then not provide the proper incentives to do it.
Yes.
Roddy, Jasmine, thank you very much indeed. And if you want to find out what it means for you, you can use our personal tax calculator on our website, Sky News.